Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Unbiased F1 podcast. My name is Adam. As usual, I am joined by George.
Hello, guys.
I'm also joined by Johnny.
What's going on, guys?
And today we have a special guest with us by the name of Lauren. Say hello.
Hey.
And today we are going to be going over last week's Bahrain Grand Prix. Plenty of storylines, lots of action, and plenty to discuss. So let's get into it. Yeah, so the Bahrain Grand Prix, there was lots of incidents, and we're gonna kind of switch up the format as to what we usually do. So last season we would kind of go through the race in order as things happened. This season we're going to do something slightly different, and we're going to go up the grid as it finished. And we're going to start with Haas. We're going to let Johnny do his little ramble about Mazepin. Corner number 3. What happened, Johnny?
Well, I should start off by saying I've been requested not to be as, normal on my Mazepin slander, so I'll try to keep it brief. He's an idiot. He shouldn't. He doesn't deserve to be in the sport, and he showed it all weekend. I'll keep it nice and simple like that. That's my straight opinion on him.
Okay, but what actually happened?
Oh, what happened? He's an idiot. He he's just going. He gets what? Do you get hit by someone or something? Slight little touch, and he just went off. Same corner as Grosjean by the side, and he's just gone out the race. He lasted not even till turn 3. He did more formation laps than he did actual laps of the race. That's a funny stat to me.
Yeah, George, it wasn't the best start for Haas in general, but we'll get on to Schumacher in a minute. What do you think went wrong with just Mazepin's entire weekend, really? Because we saw a few spins in qualifying and practice as well.
I don't think Mazepin was a very popular person this weekend, was he? He spun several times, including in pivotal moments like at the end of Q1, which has seemed to ruin Ocon and Vettel, I believe. In qualifying, Vettel ended up getting a penalty and starting from the very back of the grid after his poor qualifying. So I don't think he was popular. And for the turn 3 incident on lap 1, he just planted the throttle too early. Cold tyres, no heat in the brakes or tyres. He had no grip, so it was just a rookie error from a rookie driver. And yeah, it looked like the Haas was all over the place because don't forget that Schumacher had a couple of spins as well. So it's going to be a difficult season for Haas considering they're not going to develop their car. And Steiner's come out and said they're not going to develop the car once this season. They're focusing on the regulation change next year. So I don't think this will be the only time we see Haas struggling.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of taken my question there for Lauren. It was a difficult start. It was a difficult start for Haas. We saw Schumacher have a couple of little issues coming out of corners and things like that. That the Haas does look quite unstable at times. It's going to be a difficult season for Haas, isn't it, Lauren? It's what do you think about their prospects for the coming season?
I mean, during Bahrain, I think they really showed, that they're rookies with a pretty shockingly bad car. I don't think that helped. I think that amplified the fact that, Mazepin spun a couple times, Schumacher was struggling. And I mean, if the last few years are anything to go on, and yeah, I don't see them doing too well if they're not going to develop the car like other teams are. Then they're going to be kind of stuck down there at the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, this follow up is kind of open to the floor. If anyone has any opinions, please feel free to shout. The risk of not developing your car this season is obviously a very big one. You're kind of almost disregarding this season completely if your car is awful, which it kind of looks that way already. Do you think this risk will pay off? Do you think in whatever work they're doing behind the scenes for the 2022 car, do you think the risk is going to pay off? Do you reckon they've got something up their sleeve waiting?
I mean, they could do. It's a lot of the time when you're coming up with a new car for the next season, you want to use the data that you get from the season before. Still doing that, but if they're putting all their focus on it for next year, when it's the whole new car, new rule changes, they could have a plan set for it. It's interesting to see. I would like to see Haas get back up to where they were when they first started, when they came into the sport. We're actually decent back then. And even though they didn't have a great race, there was still some decent moments, I think, from Schumacher. And it'd be great to see him as well getting back up and seeing him Schumacher and getting points at least. So we can hope that they are focusing for a better future.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Schumacher did seem to have some good moments early on. They did kind of struggle as the race went on, and in the end, the Haas did look miles off the pace. But yeah, I agree with you there. Schumacher definitely did have a few little moments early on where it looked like he, could be competitive, maybe in a faster car.
What moments are you talking about? Am I missing something? I didn't see any moments of any Haas being competitive
Earlier on,
last week.
Earlier on in the race, he had a few decent battles. I mean, he may have lost them, but he looked a decent driver. In the first few laps, I think.
Yeah, he got overtaken 7 times, so promising start for Haas. It's looking good for the season. I mean, come on, Haas are not going to be competitive with anyone. There was no bright spark. They spun like under 80% throttle. In my opinion, there's no hope for Haas this year. And I think they've accepted that. They've made peace with that.
Yeah, I agree for Haas. My argument is with Schumacher. In a better car, he'd be better. That's my argument. You here to make start fights here, George.
No, I'm just saying that I thought I missed some big Schumacher moments, some sends in the first few laps, but I think he was the one being sent.
I mean, it wasn't any big moments for him, but I think it was just, we want to hope that he can do something. I think he didn't exactly, except for the spin he had early on, I don't think he really did anything else too wrong in his race. It was kind of just on his own because of the Haas being so bad. But I think, he won the F2 championship last year for a reason. He's a good driver. So I think it's just going to be one of those, just like, I know you're going to disagree with me here, George, but George Russell, he's just a good driver in a bad car. He can do things if he was in the right car, but it's just, Haas is terrible.
I think it's worth mentioning, though, about Schumacher. In all of the championships that he's won in F3, in F2, he took a year to develop his understanding of the series, and it was the next year that he made the big jump, and he made the jump to winning the championship after that. So, we're not expecting him to start, sticking on the podium or on pole or anything, but
yeah,
I think give it another season or two. And Binotto's spoken about how he wants him in the Ferrari setup in the future. So it's not terrible for Schumacher.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously he had was it a practice weekend or something with Alpha last season, who seemed to have done a little bit better as well. We're gonna kind of skip over Alfa Romeo and Williams because they didn't really do too much. They were kind of bottom of the rest of the pack, and I don't think there's too much really to say about them. And we're going to move on to another car that was kind of disappointing, and that's the Alpines. So we ended up having Ocon finish 13th. Just got it up there on the screen. We ended up having Ocon finish 13th, and Alonso ended up DNFing. What exactly was that about again? Because I completely forgot why he actually DNF'd.
I think I was seeing it somewhere that apparently he had some sort of bit of rubbish or some wrapper that got in somewhere in the car. That's what caused his retirement, which was a shame because he was doing all right before.
Yeah.
I mean, he made Q3 in qualifying. He was having a decent enough race. It's what we want to see from Alonso. He's probably the best rookie on the grid. So I want to see him doing well. And I think it was just seeing him go out was a bit of a shame. But it's a long season still. We'll see a lot more from him if he's putting up that sort of fight from the first race. Then he should be all right. We'll see a lot more of him.
Did I see a little shake of the head there from Lauren there?
No, it's just from Johnny saying Alonso being the best of the rookies. Just I've heard that so much this season so far.
It's overused. I agree with Lauren here. It's an overused joke, and mainly because Alonso is my favourite driver. He's the reason I started watching F1. So I'm always going to defend my boy.
Go take the mic all the time, then that.
So yeah, the car so far itself hasn't maybe lived up to the performances Renault has had in previous seasons. You would kind of be hoping they'd be battling a lot closer to maybe the McLarens and the Ferraris up, battling for third. But they fell behind, well, one of the Aston Martins and the AlphaTauris. And obviously the one car that did finished behind both Alfa Romeos as well. So where do you think improvements can be made within this Alpine? I keep saying it wrong. Where do you think improvements can be made within this team? Do you think it's just entirely the car? Or do you think it's maybe Alonso getting used to the car?
Well, I mean, just the main. There's not really anything main problem I think with them. They just had a bit of an unlucky race, and it's still the first race of the season. Like we've all said, it's going to be a long season. I think they're going to work for that development like Haas for next year, but also concentrate on this year. But yeah, Alonso, that sort of thing that he had on that weekend isn't going to happen every race. Ocon as well. That was just like George said, unlucky from completely Vettel's fault. And I expect them to be up with the rest of the midfield battle because that's going to be a good one this year, along with the McLarens and the AlphaTauris. That's going to be a good midfield battle this year. I think they expect them to be up there with them as well. So I think this was just a one-off unlucky race for the two drivers.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there the midfield battle is going to be very interesting this season, definitely. I think there's quite a few teams, even Ferrari and McLaren could be sucked in if they stumble at some point in the season. And, if Aston Martin, if Alpine, if AlphaTauri can, get their car up to speed quickly enough, they could absolutely be fighting for not really midfield, but third in constructors even, if they get quick enough. One thing you did mention there, both you and George, was the incident with Vettel. Vettel didn't have the best weekend, did he? With a grid penalty and a penalty in the race, and some penalty points on his license. What do you think went wrong, Johnny?
I don't really know. It's he got unlucky definitely in qualifying because that was Mazepin going off and then him just not really slowing down. A bit his fault for not slowing down enough, but they're still unlucky that he's not came out of Q1. And then the race, he kind of messed up with that Ocon incident. I think it is still. I think for most of us as fans, it's still just reeling off last year with Vettel just feeling so bad for him for everything that went on with Ferrari that it's like to see it then seemingly continue into this first race is a bit like he's getting done over again. But I think it was just a bit of just not a great first race for him first start of the season. I reckon it's still it should be a decent enough car, the Aston Martin. I don't think it seemed to be underwhelmed a little bit this first race, but that could just be new car. They could still be up there, so it's just I think that the whole thing with it is that it's literally the first race of the season. We're going to be going on for another 20 odd races. Can't really say too much about people standing as it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, like you kind of alluded to there, George, I was just wondering if you sort of agree with what most people are saying. It's just taking him a bit of time to get used to the car, really.
It's a big transition for him to make. He's been at Ferrari since 2015. He was so acclimatized to the environment there. Small things like the steering wheel, switches and submenus. This will take so long to work out. It's like if you're switching from iPhone to Android, you've got this whole new operating system to work out. You've got to find the submenus, the buttons, the switches. It's all completely different. And again, with having a Mercedes engine compared to a Ferrari engine, it's something completely different to him. I have full confidence that Vettel will thrive again. It's just about him getting his own confidence back and building on that. And I mean, we've known about the pink Mercedes for a while. We don't know if that's a thing this year. I don't think they have copied as much, but it remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reports in the last week, especially Toto Wolff coming out and saying that the regulation changes to the back of the floor is specifically designed to slow down Mercedes cars. And you saw, Aston Martin see a bit of that effect. Maybe it wasn't talked about quite as much as with the Mercedes. Lauren, I was wondering what you were thinking about. Their design philosophy being so close to Mercedes, they see similar issues. Do you think they'll be able to overcome those issues, or do you think they might be like some people are saying with Mercedes, and they'll have a significant pace advantage for the rest of the season, maybe? Or disadvantage, I mean.
I think, yeah. I mean, it's so early to kind of tell. It might have just been a single race. They had an off kind of weekend. Seb just got really unlucky. I think in terms of the car and its likeness to Mercedes and performance wise, I think it's kind of. I think we'll see. If they can overcome the kind of bumps that they've had. I mean, last season they did pretty well. Stroll and Perez got a few podiums and all that. But this season's car, I mean, I think we'll see a bit more of it as the tracks get a bit different, and Seb's got to settle, and yeah, I think, yeah.
So yeah, you think that once everything's settled and once they've kind of worked out the early issues, they'll improve.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to our next team in the midfield. We had obviously Stroll picking up a 10th place, but just ahead of him was Yuki Tsunoda on his F1 debut. Johnny, you got a bit of a grin on your face. How are you feeling after that?
He's just such a cute little human being. I mean, I saw a little clip of him, and I think it was post race. Went to his interview. He had to go like angle the thing down because he's just too small. I mean, I love the guy. You can't hate him. He's got to be one of those sort of drivers, isn't he? And to him to have such a good race. I mean, there was that moment during it. He's literally battling with Raikkonen, Alonso, and Vettel. That's 7 world championships there he's going up against, and he's come out on top. It was just a fantastic race from him. I think he did so well, and it's just so cute. That's my main takeaway from him. I just love him. I love him so much. I didn't think I'd love him this much, but I do.
I mean, he was one of a handful of debutants, and I think no one can disagree that he was, one of the most impressive looking of the handful. Obviously, picking up points on debut is a big thing. You must be very nervous coming into F1. The AlphaTauri car that he's got, though, does look like it could be very quick, George.
Yeah, I think when they rebranded as AlphaTauri, they made it clear, along with Red Bull, that they're no longer a junior team; they're more of a sister team, and they're sort of working together. So Honda basically have 4 cars that are almost or getting closer in terms of performance. As for Tsunoda, I think a lot of people are just being feeling refreshed after that weekend and having a debutant who's come in and just brings a feel good factor about him. Obviously, it's great PR for AlphaTauri. They get lots of engagement, lots of likes, and it's a good PR move for them to have a driver like Tsunoda, sort of like a bubbly, funny personality. And it's also a benefit for him that he's like 5'4" or 5'5". The ride height in the car, he won't weigh as much as the likes of Hulkenberg, who's like, what's he, 6'3" or something, 6'3", 6'4".
Something like that.
He's absolutely huge. So Tsunoda will be happy with that. But yeah, he had a good race. He got some points. He'll be happy with that. I'm sure there's a lot more to come from him. There'll be ups and downs throughout the season, but I expected him to get points, to be honest. He's got a very fast car. He did very well in F2 last year. So he did what I expected of him. It's probably a bit anticlimactic what you're expecting from me, but I just expected him to get points.
Yeah, I mean, and talking of the car in general, you've got Gasly. Unfortunately, he did DNF in the end, but he qualified a 5th spot on the grid. Lauren, how encouraging must a good start like this, a 5th place qualifying place in the first race, how encouraging must that be for AlphaTauri as a team?
Hugely encouraging. I think the last few years or the last season as AlphaTauri, you know, they had a fairly decent car. They had some good race results, and now, you know, Gasly is probably, compared to Yuki, a senior driver. And I mean, he just got very unlucky in the race. But in terms of qualifying, he had a really good 3 sessions. And you know, P5 was a great way to kind of start the season, which with what looked like a pretty good car. It was a shame to not see him, you know, actually compete during the race, because I know he was at the back for the majority of the laps. But you know, I think if he hadn't got caught up in what he had and had to make that kind of earlier pit stop, then I think you probably could have seen 2 AlphaTauris in the top 10, Gasly along with Yuki. But yeah, no, I think the car was really kind of it was really quite nice to see them doing well. So yeah, I hope the rest of the races are like that.
Yeah, definitely very encouraging signs for AlphaTauri, especially in this midfield. A midfield that also consists of Ferrari, which I never thought I'd actually be saying, but after last season, it was a complete shocker, really. This season, it's kind of having Ferrari in that midfield is a bit more. I don't know. It feels normal, but it also doesn't feel normal because they shouldn't be there. But you had Sainz finishing 8th, Leclerc finishing 6th. You know, it was kind of a fairly average race for them, George.
Yeah, Ferrari. It's good to see them making progress. It's good to see that they're significantly quicker than they were last year. They're still not where they want to be. They want to be battling with Mercedes and Red Bull like they have been for previous years. But in terms of raw pace, there's definitely a step forward. And Leclerc seemed very surprised actually with a P4 in quali. Obviously, they slipped down a couple of positions in the race. But I think, you know, him and Sainz will be developing that car as much as possible throughout the next few seasons. Don't write off Carlos Sainz, in my opinion, one of the best drivers on the grid. Certainly in the top 5 for me. He's a ridiculous driver. So I think Ferrari will be there or thereabouts come the end of the season. But it'll be interesting to find their balance, how they find their balance through the season. How much are they going to invest in this year's car? How much are they going to hold back and focus on the regulation change in the future? So be interesting to see how that plays out, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, most of that raw pace that they've kind of made up again was very apparent in qualifying. Me and Johnny were messaging each other throughout the qualifying, and we were like, Ferrari are alright. And then all of a sudden they pull out like a second and third place laps in, I think it's Q2, at the end of Q2. And we were just like, where did that come from? You know, we've not really seen that in testing. Ferrari definitely do look to have gained some of their pace back. Like you say, Sainz, similar to, I suppose, Vettel as well, and all the other new drivers, he'll still be getting used to that Ferrari car, won't he, Lauren?
I mean, yeah, for sure. It's a new environment from him. I think it's completely different to McLaren. Well, it's not. It is definitely different to McLaren. So not only has he had to like get used to the car itself, but he's had to get used to the team and the people around him. I think it was encouraging to see him in the Ferrari doing fairly well. I mean, he qualified okay, and the race he had some good battles and you know, fighting for positions. So I think that's definitely an encouraging sign for him. It might give him a little bit of confidence, because obviously last season Ferrari weren't exactly in everyone's kind of you know, minds. They were having a bit of an off season, but yeah, I mean, in the next few races, I think they'll try to get some consistency, or he'll try to get some consistency in qualifying and in the races, and you know, go from there.
I've seen a lot of sort of, not rumours, but people talking on Twitter and things like that, of because of Leclerc's big deal with Ferrari and the amount of time he's going to be spending there under contract. There's a lot of people sort of speculating Sainz is stepping into Leclerc's team, not Ferrari. He's stepping into, you know, the cars tailored to him, similar to sort of Verstappen and whoever his teammates end up being, whether it be Albon, Gasly, or now Perez. What do you make of them those sort of rumblings of, you know, Sainz has to adapt to how Leclerc wants the car and how Leclerc has the team running.
I mean, Ferrari have always been one of them teams that have to have that first driver and have to have a second one. That's just how they've always operated. Saw it with, well, I mean, most recently Vettel was their first driver because obviously four-time world champion. Then having Leclerc come in, obviously just a new driver. That's just always how it's been. But I doubt they'll be thinking like that at all now. You know, there's Leclerc and Sainz are the two drivers with a lot of potential and are good drivers as well. I don't think, yeah, Leclerc's got this big deal. I think that's just where he's been in the team. He's been with the Ferrari program for long enough, and he's sort of deserved of it. He's had a couple race wins with them. Whilst Sainz has come in, he's their new driver, but he definitely has a future there. So I think it's those rumours. I think those are just like natural people just talking. They've might have heard something somewhere from someone, and it's just running with the story. But I don't think there's anything to say that he's stepping into Leclerc's team. Ferrari is still reeling off of last year's disappointment, so it will be very much just okay. We're on a level playing field. Let's just get back to where we know we can be, which is fighting for the constructors.
Yeah, certainly. And looking on pace in that first race alone, you've got Ferrari and you've got McLaren really that really look to have showed up this season ready to start really well. Obviously, Ricciardo finishing a place ahead of Sainz, finishing 7th, and we had Norris finishing 4th. I say not too far from a podium. He was a fair bit away from the podium, but places he's a one off, so we'll take it. McLaren's chances this season is Red Bull and Mercedes look way off in the distance. Do you think if McLaren keep up their good form, George, do you think third is theirs to lose?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. There's going to be a lot of McLaren fanboys and particularly Lando fans that think McLaren are, streets ahead of the midfield, but sadly, that's for them. It's not the case. But I don't think they're that far away from Mercedes and Red Bull in terms of raw or pace. There's obviously a gap of a few tenths, but the gap wasn't that big between even Leclerc and Bottas on in qualifying. Neither between the McLarens and Ferrari. So I think they're close. Obviously, they've got a big step to make. I don't think they'll make that this year. I think they're more worried about the regulation change in the future. McLaren, you're looking at the standings. Yeah, of course, McLaren are the third best team right now, but there's a long way to go in this season.
Yeah, you can't read too much into these first results, but we're doing our best. The inclusion of Ricciardo, bringing in Ricciardo, has got to be considered a really big move for them. It's a signal of intent, really. But what do you think they're trying to? What do you think their end goal is? Do you reckon they'll be happy with, being best of the rest, or do you reckon in future they'll push to be up with Red Bull? We'll get Lauren's thoughts on this first because Johnny's camera seems to have disconnected.
He's back. He's back.
He's back. I think Ricciardo's got a lot of ambition. He had a lot of ambition when he went to Renault. He wanted them to do well. He was with them a couple of seasons, and they didn't really do too much. I think coming to McLaren, I think he's probably saw or had seen last season what they'd been able to produce because they had a fairly good season. Obviously, they came third in the constructors at the end of the season. I think he brings some interesting racing to the team, and I think with that car, I think he can do pretty well. I suspect in some of the future races we'll see him, maybe get finish a bit higher up. But yeah, I think he's a good addition to the McLaren team.
And Johnny, do you think with Ricciardo and obviously Norris, who is a very good driver in his own right, obviously coming fourth, behind the two Mercedes and Verstappen, it's not exactly an easy thing to do to come fourth in a race. Do you think their ambition this season will be to be pushing Red Bull and Mercedes, or do you think a few podiums here and there will do for them?
think they'll want to. They'll have the ambition to go for that. Pushing for the podiums. I think it has to be said. Loris is fourth. It has a little bit of luck to it because of what happened with Perez. Obviously, didn't really get off the line at first. I know we'll get to Red Bull and especially him, but he's fought his way back from all the way at the back of the grid. So I think they might, they'll be happy with what they get as long as they're winning that proper, like getting up to third place. But it is McLaren. They're one of the most prolific teams in Formula One. They'll want to be fighting for the best positions. They'll want to be back up on the podiums, and they know from last year you can sometimes get races that anything can happen. So, if they're already up there with the top guys, finishing fourth, and even Ricardo's seventh, if they get the opportunity where a win can be there for them, they're gonna go for it, and they're gonna have a good opportunity to go for it. For Ricardo, I think he's just like with Tsunoda, so like all the new drivers, it's a new team. Seventh is still a very good position, so a good place to finish. So I think it's only going to grow with that, and it's going to end up, they're going to look good. They're going to have a fantastic season, I reckon. And yeah, definitely, like I said, push for some podiums. That's what they want.
Yeah, I mean they're going to have a hard time pushing for those podiums because the front two, Red Bull and Mercedes, do look very strong. We will move on to them because we are kind of running out of time to record this. So we've kind of ignored him so far, but we can't ignore him now. Sergio Perez, driver of the day. What an incredible drive that was, George.
I'm not sure if I've made my feelings clear about Perez before, but I think Perez probably either is my second or third favorite driver. The way that he conducted himself throughout the entirety of last year, with his whole contract situation going up, the way he fought back and from dead last and won in the Sake GP, and again we've seen that resilience throughout his career. I can't remember what race it was. I believe he was hunting down my favorite driver Alonso in the Sauber years and years ago in Malaysia, and that was right at the very start of his career. And we've seen this kind of resilience from him. And obviously, it's standard Red Bull second driver luck with what happened on the formation lap. Engine just dies, no battery power. Yeah, it summed up the Red Bull second driver position in terms of luck. And starting from the pit lane is, worse than starting at the back of the grid because you have to wait for every single car to pass the pit exit and then to go for yourself. So his performance was ridiculous, and he proved why he deserves that seat more than Alex Albon.
Yeah, as you say, starting at the back in the pit lane, obviously difficult enough, but they decided to bring him in for a really early stop as well. That the drive to kind of recover from all of that, it must be really mentally taxing. How relieved do you reckon he'll be, Johnny, to even end up with points, let alone where he actually finished?
It seems to be a good circuit for him. He seems to like it. I mean, like you pointed out, from last to winning last year in Sakir. And yeah, just a fifth place was good. He had seemed to be on a completely different strategy to everyone else as well, because of that early pit stops he had. But yeah, he's done really well. I think he'll be very happy that he's moved from like this lateral move. It seems going from that pink Mercedes last year to Red Bull, who are competing a little bit more. I think he'll know that he can, be pushing for those the race wins as well at some point.
Yeah, and Lauren, obviously, as George had alluded to, the second driver position at Red Bull has kind of been a bit cursed recently. But finally, it looks like Verstappen might have, maybe not an equal, but someone to at least push him.
Definitely. I think there'll be definitely a bit more pushing for positions from Perez. I think he'll be a bit more competitive. He'll want a bit. He'll want a bit of control in the team, in terms of he is purely senior driver to Max, but Max is that number one driver at Red Bull. But if the last race, coming from pit lane to fifth place is an amazing drive, and he's an amazing driver. So I think that I think that new competition for Max is going to be quite interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see how the season plays out with them two, for once.
Yeah, I mean, and Red Bull just in general look quite good this season. We will be talking about the Verstappen Hamilton battle that they had. I do feel sorry for Bottas. We are going to kind of gloss over him for today. I'm sure later on in the season we'll have plenty to talk about him versus Hamilton. But for now, we're going to gloss over Bottas. He, very solid in third. Can't really say too much about his race. Verstappen versus Hamilton then. And track limits. Johnny, you love track limits, don't you?
If it's Lewis abusing them and nothing going, if it's going his way, then yeah, I love it. It was it was very interesting. I mean, I can't remember exactly how many times it was. I think it was around 30. I think someone said it was like 33 times from the race. He used that line that he was taking.
I think
That
lap
he went
33
on
was
top.
when he was told
Mm.
I think
off.
it's 29 lap that he went over track limits
Yeah,
out of the 50, however, 56.
yeah.
And number 33 is Verstappen's car number, so Illuminati there.
Look at that. Some mad stuff going on. I was very funny when Horner came over, whoever it was for Red Bull, and then was like, "But Lewis is taking this different line. They're not saying anything, so you take it."
And then they said something.
That was getting any advantage that they can to keep up. They're going to, but it's just a great battle. It's what we want to be seeing all season. It's what we wanted to see for a long time, and for Lewis to have come out on top again, he just showed it. Like it was a bit. I know there were some people who didn't take too happily with Verstappen having to give the place back, but it was the right decision at the end of the day. And if it wasn't Lewis, you'd expect Max to go take that first place back on that next pit straight or the next lap. But Lewis just showing how good he is when those tires are completely gone. It was amazing. It's one of those reasons why I love Formula One. It's one example for the most recent I can remember. Just point to that. It's just beautiful.
Obviously, towards the end, Max did finally get Lewis in turn 4. George, was there an element of Lewis pushing Max too wide, or do you think that was fair and Max should have, backed off and let Hamilton keep the position?
Ask me that question in 15 seconds, because I know you said gloss over Bottas. The one thing I want to say about Bottas is that his pit stop, he was having a superb race. His strategy was very questionable for Mercedes. They split it with Hamilton. His pit stop was abysmal. Back-to-back terrible pit stops in Bahrain. I feel like Bottas was shafted today, and it's a standard luck for Bottas. I think he's the most unluckiest driver on the grid. On pace, Mercedes posted on their socials a few days after the race with the average stint times. He was quicker than Lewis in 2 out of 3 stints. So, he had pace. But as for the Max and Lewis battle, I agree with Johnny. That's what F1 is all about. And I couldn't believe it as watching with my family members. Couldn't believe that Hamilton was staying ahead on those tires. Like that just proves why he is the greatest driver on the grid by a margin. I don't think any other driver would have been able to do that on those tires. Forcing Verstappen wide at turn 4. I don't think that was the case. I think Verstappen had a lot of space on the outside. Hamilton obviously going to try and defend that inside, so he has the inside for the next corner at turn 5. People are getting very distracted with track limits. I'm sure you're going to ask me a question about track limits or ask us about track limits.
Maybe.
And the thing is, you got to understand that Verstappen gained a position, and the most lucrative position. He gained the victory, the leading position of the race through going off the circuit. Yes, Hamilton may have done it 30 times, and he was gaining an advantage. So there needs to be a black and white rule, from the race stewards at all parts of the circuit, not an exception at turn 4, like Michael Massey said for this week. If you go outside of the white line on the outside of the curb, then that's an off track. A bit like iRacing, if anyone's driven iRacing, probably no one here. But when you go outside the white lines, you should be penalised for that. And Hamilton was doing that, but he didn't gain a position, but he did gain an advantage, a lasting advantage. So it's very grey, very very confusing, and I'm sure everyone's got an opinion on it.
Yeah, I think the main confusion came from the discrepancy in the rule between qualifying and practice and the actual race itself. Qualifying and practice, if you went off the track at turn 4, your lap time was deleted, and that's probably how it. You got punished for it. That's probably how it should have been in the race. What do you think, Lauren, about the whole sort of the debate between changing rules between sessions?
I think they should have been more clear. I think a lot of people on Twitter during the race, and it seems you guys were slightly confused by the change. Not so much the change, but having it, rule it in qualifying, having it ruled one way, and then in the race having it ruled the other. And I think, it just comes down to the Lewis, doing it the entire race, and then Max getting penalised that one time. I think, they seem to be changing it for the next race in Imola, the no nonsense track limits rule, or whatever they're calling it.
Didn't hear about that no nonsense thing, but not saying. I think it makes sense. They are just completely all over the place at times. It's going, like saying, from qualifying, from being like, no, you can't be doing that. The whole race, Lewis is doing it. That's a bit iffy there. But I think if he did it that many times, they obviously would have looked at it after the first couple and been like, if they found a problem with it, then they would have said, okay, you can't do it anymore, give him a penalty. But I think it's kind of looking into it more as, I think we're just looking into it too much now. If they didn't find a problem with it, then there was no problem. And the thing is that it's so big is because Max got his advantage from it when he went off, and he had to give his place back. But that was a different situation. That's making a move whilst off the track. That is what we know is a definite no. So I think it's one of those situations there where it's just, I think people want to see Max going for that win because they're tired of Lewis winning too much, which you get. But anyway, we're happy with that battle, and it felt like it was Max's to lose that race. But at the end of the day, it's just got to see, got to stern up with their rules. But as long as we're getting good racing, I'm happy.
I think as well, I just want to jump in quickly before you jump in, Adam.
Yep.
And just say this doesn't help new fans. The discrepancy between the rules here, things that I Drive to Survive, bringing in so many new fans. Haven't finished the season. I've only watched a couple of episodes, but it's bringing in so many, casuals that perhaps may not have watched Formula One before, and they've seen the Netflix series or they've seen, the Twitch streams of the Leclerc, Norris, etc. This doesn't help when the rules are so confusing, the track limits that are different, and how this doesn't even really support things that they've said in the past in terms of track limits. Going off a track here is fine, but you can't do it there, and everlasting advantage, and this just doesn't help. It needs to be, like Lauren said, with their no nonsense track limits this weekend.
Yeah, and I won't try and drag the argument on too much longer, but I think the key words are the everlasting advantage, and the only reason Max's move was an everlasting advantage is because it's right at the end of the race. So of course it's going to be. But, gaining that slight advantage throughout the race is very questionable, and it is, first few laps, the race stewards maybe should have looked at it and gone, this is going to lead to an everlasting advantage, let's stop it now. I think that's maybe what they should have done. Obviously they didn't, and Hamilton ended up winning with Verstappen second and Bottas third on the podium. It was an enjoyable race all in all, and we're getting ready to do it all again. For some reason a 3-week break, but we're getting ready to do it all again in Italy. Quick thoughts on that race?
Well, I enjoyed Imola last year. It was a decent race, one of the new ones that they brought back in. And Hamilton picking up the win that time. I think you see him probably do some goodness again there this year. The Red Bulls, though, looking possibly quicker, or at least as quick as Mercedes. So, seeing Max fighting again, that'll be what we all want to see. Also, Perez, if he can not get cursed this time, he can definitely push for it. Bottas as well, unlucky in Bahrain, so he'll be wanting to get something from this next one. So I think it could be a real interesting one. And if it's anything like last year as well, we could have some surprises, even a McLaren or someone else, a Ferrari on the podium or something. It's just it's early days still. Can't comment too much on what's going to happen. But I think it'd be exciting to watch. It'll be an exciting race.
You looking for any surprises, Lauren, next week? Oh, not next week, week after.
I mean, as Johnny said, last year's race at Imola was, it was it was the first time that they raced there in however many years. It threw up a few kind of curveballs. Obviously, Daniel Ricciardo got his third place. He got his one of his 2 podiums there. But I mean, pretty similar to Johnny. If the first race is kind of anything to go by, if Red Bull are really that close to Mercedes, and both Perez and Verstappen might actually be able to kind of compete with Mercedes, and maybe there might be a new McLaren might get a podium if Norris can do what he did in Bahrain and Imola, or even Danny Rick, because obviously he did it last year. We could see one of many teams, pick up that final podium. But I think it's going to be interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to it. And yeah.
And George, and you'll be glad I saved this question for you and not Johnny. Are you looking forward to seeing Mazepin spin out on the third corner at Imola this time?
Well, it's turn 3 at Imola, so you got a chicane. I don't know if you count turn 1 at Imola as like the first little bend at the left. Maybe the chicane. I'm not sure. I don't think it'll spin at turn 3. But I've driven Imola a lot on the sim when I racing, and yeah, it's a really fun track. I really like it. Perhaps a tiny little bit too narrow for F1 in my opinion, or modern F1, because the cars are so wide. But yeah, it's going to be crazy, especially with the amount of chicanes we have, elevation changes. If they're going to be super tight on the track limits, the exit of the final chicanes is going to be a talking point, no doubt. If there's going to be another Verstappen Hamilton moment like there was at Bahrain. But yeah, it remains to be seen. I'm sure Imola will provide a spectacle like it always does.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are looking forward to that race. We will be back after that race to review it and go over it like we have done here. But I think that's about it for our podcast today. So thank you for joining us. This is goodbye from myself, George.
Thank you all for watching. Make sure you follow us on Instagram, by the way, at Unbiased F1 Podcast.
Yep.
DM us your thoughts.
Yeah, we need that engagement. Johnny, you want to say goodbye? Any final thoughts?
Only final thought is I don't think Mazepin's even going to make that first little turn next race, but that's about it. Have to get that in there. But no, yeah, thank you guys for listening.
If he doesn't make that first corner, you literally have to go like 200 yards to turn around that corner. So that is a terrible start.
I can fully see it though. Fully see him going.
This podcast for the rest of the season is just going to be Mazepin slander for 50%, and then the rest of it's going to be an actual review. Well, Lauren, thank you very much for coming on and joining us. Do you have any final thoughts?
I probably should say thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, I'm looking forward to Imola in a few weeks.
Brilliant. And we will, like I say, we will be back after that race to review it. But until then, I'll say goodbye and we'll see you then.